Welcome to Glasgow Rangers Nation. I'm Owen James. This is all your latest Rangers news. Ready, aim, fire. That's right. A former Rangers star and also a football finance expert have taken aim at Rangers and have pretty much branded the club a shambles, branded the club a circus, and pretty much criticised the club and stated that things were getting worse in the gap between us and that lot from across the city. That's not what I'm saying. That's what Derek Ferguson and Stefan Borson have been saying. Derek Ferguson, obviously former Rangers player, and Stefan Borson, financial expert, former financial advisor to a number of Premier League clubs, including Manchester City. Yeah, I mean, that's probably quite dodgy considering the 115 charges, although they are, innocent until presumed guilty. We don't want to get sued by Manchester City's lawyers here on Glasgow Rangers Nation. We know how vociferous they are. Anyway, why has Derek Ferguson branded them a shambles and a circus? And what has Stefan Borson had to say about the boardroom? And that's where this criticism from Borson comes from. He talks about the boardroom and the issues in the financial side of the things. He talks more of the off the field, whereas Ferguson kind of talks a little bit of on field and a little bit of off field too in his criticism. Look, I mean, Ferguson has always been vocal, hasn't he? He's always been open and he's always talked about the club. And you tend to find, so, that when ex-players speak about a club and they've come from an era where, the club had success, you're kind of a little bit more inclined to listen to what they've got to say. So let's have a little look, shall we, at what Derek Ferguson has been saying before we get into what Stefan Borson has been saying about the club. And look, I'll be really interested to get your take on this. What's your view on this? Do you agree with what Ferguson and Borson say, or do you think they're kind of just, looking for a bit of a few column inches and a little bit of, a little bit of fame on the back of one of the biggest clubs in European football? Let me have your opinions. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about what Derek Ferguson had to say first. It was all around the Samuel Edozie transfer that collapsed, of course. And I think, it's kind of been proven a little bit, and it kind of linked as well to what Derek Ferguson was saying about Robbie Matondo, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. I think if we look at this moment in time, we do need a winger. We had the deal for Edozie just suddenly fall through at the last minute. And obviously there was the deal as well for the guy, I can't remember the guy's name, the guy from Bayern Munich, who went to Augsburg. His name escapes me at the moment. Very difficult to pronounce. That's what I do remember about it. This is what Derek Ferguson had to tell Ibrox News. He said, "I've not got a clue what happened, but Russell, as in Russell Martin, has come out and said he says it was Rangers' fault. And you know something? He's probably right. It's been a bit of a circus at the moment. There's so many things where Rangers let themselves down big time. And that just looks like another one." So it's clear that, Derek really isn't happy with what's going on at the club, and I think, look, no matter what you kind of think about where we are as a club at this moment in time, in terms of development, in terms of a squad gelling, in terms of, the manager having an opportunity to impress, etc., there is I suppose, it can be argued, a slight element of incompetence around the board at this moment in time, a slight, not just the board, but the whole football structure. At this moment in time, there is a bit of a kind of what next. I mean, I think a lot of it, obviously, around obviously the departures of all the senior figures and the rebuild that kind of has been half done. I mean, it's kind of like, half building the house but forgetting to put the roof on. So there's little elements of things that obviously people are not particularly happy about there. And Ferguson, it's clear, thinks it's a bit of a circus at Rangers at this moment in time. Think of a bit of a, I think, what's the word we're looking for? Shit show, I think the correct word is. And that's what Ferguson has got to say. I'd love to know your opinion, guys, on these views from Derek Ferguson. He went on to say this. He said, "So if Russell Martin's come out and said that, do you know something? I believe him. Rangers have probably been at fault, as they have been with a number of issues over the course of the last number of years. So that wouldn't surprise me one single bit." I mean, Ferguson's right to some element there. Rangers have got a lot of previous on making bad decisions and bad moves in terms of managerial appointments, contracts, signings, stadiums, Australia. It really isn't a kind of, it doesn't really fill you with a lot of confidence in the decision-making process, does it? So for Russell Martin to come out and kind of brand all this and drop all of this at the at the feet of Rangers is, quite apt. I mean, Edozie was all set to come, and obviously now he's managed to get a loan move to Anderlecht. But I suppose you could argue, well, that's Russell Martin would say that, wouldn't he? He wouldn't want to look like he was to blame for something, or Southampton was at blame, and he would back his own club. So, look, I think until we get someone from Rangers comes out and tells the exact story, until Edozie comes out and tells his side, I don't think we actually genuinely know what goes on and what has gone on in terms of that deal. But I don't think it's just around that deal that Ferguson's making this point, of Rangers being a bit of a circus at this moment in time. He's entitled to his opinion, whether you agree with it or you disagree with it. That is where he is coming from at this moment in time. Now, he went on to talk a little bit about Rabbi Matondo as well. Now, Rabbi Matondo is yet again out injured. Rabbi seems to spend a lot of time on the treatment table at this present moment in time. He was last season, he missed a large number of games. And again, this season, he is now missing a massive number of games. And Ferguson's kind of saying that he thinks, in his opinion, that Matondo should have been allowed to leave during the summer transfer window. I mean, obviously, there was talk of Leeds being interested, there was talk of Norwich being interested. Obviously, Norwich came in with a deadline day bid, and that was turned down by Rangers. Maybe on the back of the Edozie deal collapsing, or I don't know what it was down to. But you know what? Ferguson has got a bit of a point on this one, actually. I mean, let's first of all, let's look at what... let's look at what he's had to say. He says, Matondo, he's one of the highest paid players, which is true. Matondo is on a decent whack at Rangers. He gave one of his best performances against a team that had just been beat by one of the lower league teams, that Spartans beating Ross County. Then he had a good game against them at Hampden. That, plus the other moment that he's given us, was the goal against Celtic. No, Matondo should have been out the door, in my opinion. I mean, I must say, I've got to kind of a little bit agree here with, with Derek Ferguson. Matondo does flatter to deceive. He really genuinely does. For a player that came in on such high wages for such a big transfer fee, for a player that has absolutely scintillating pace, he really does fail to kind of make the best of what he's got. And sometimes I think, Rabbi's another one whose brain doesn't work as fast as his feet sometimes. I think if Matondo produced, like the Celtic goal week in, week out, and in the performance, he can be capable of, like he did against PSV to some extent at Ibrox last season, he would be a fantastic footballer, but he's just so inconsistent. And many people have even branded him a better substitute, an impact substitute. But I think, he's on 22, 24 grand a week. That's a lot of money to pay someone who's just going to be an impact substitute. Matondo does flatter to deceive on a regular basis. And I've got to say, I don't understand the club's decision to keep hold of him. I mean, I personally would have allowed him to get out, to go, secured a deal for another winger, if the Edozie deal could have been pulled to a finish or whatever. I genuinely don't see Matondo as a future star for Rangers. I think he's kind of had run his race. He looks what he is, a very average footballer. And there's clubs in England that have been interested in him, and I don't understand why, but I personally would have allowed him to leave. And I do agree with Derek Ferguson. He is one of the most overhyped, overvalued players on the Rangers squad. And I think the other reason, of course, for me, why Matondo should be reviewed for an exit is not just that. It's also the fact that his injury record is pretty appalling. He has missed a large number of games. And again, for someone who is in such a massive contract, allowing him to sit in the stands constantly injured on 22, 24 grand a week is really bad business by Rangers. Right, let's move on and talk about Stefan Borson. Now, Stefan Borson, like I said, is a football finance expert. He has advised a number of Premier League clubs and worked with and for a number of Premier League clubs on the financial side of things to make sure that those clubs are PSR, FFP, as it was back then, compliant. That's kind of where his expertise is. But he was talking about Rangers' financial situation and Rangers' boardroom upheaval. And he talked about there being a bit of a vacuum at the top of the club, which is true. I mean, we've got no CEO, we've got no head of academy, we've got no director of football operations, we've got no chairman. There is a massive, massive vacuum there. And I think, as I mentioned in a previous video, you wouldn't expect any company, big company in Britain to function without a chairman and without a CEO. I mean, it just wouldn't happen. You can't imagine Jaguar Land Rover or Tesco or I don't know, Boots or I don't know, ICI trying to function without a CEO or chairman. It just would not happen. Now, this is what Borson has had to say, talking to the media. He said it's an enormous issue, talking about the lack of a chairman and CEO. It has to be addressed, and it has to be addressed quickly. Well, I think Rangers have failed to do to some extent, because obviously Bisgrove departed sort of June time, wasn't it? It also clearly points to very big around the executive team. Yes, it does. A stable organisation just doesn't have so many issues, so they will have to address it. They've got a big, difficult problems at Rangers, while Celtic are in the Champions League, and they. So yes, there is an issue there. There is for me, there is a big issue there in terms of that vacuum at the top, that gap at the top of the club, and Borson's right in the fact there is difficult issues around the fact that they are in the Champions League. We are not. That you make in the Champions League, and Celtic are fine. Make this comment. He said that swing in revenue just makes it so difficult to compete because it's such a massive difference between the two clubs. The last thing they need on top of all that is the sorts of flux in the boardroom. I mean, he's right. There is just a huge financial gap between Rangers and Celtic. We've seen that. We saw that in what they spent this summer. We've seen that in sort of the terms that what the accounts that were released, the profit, the operating profit, the turnover margins, everything. And at this moment in time, they are financially way, way, way ahead of us. And Borson's right. All these financial issues and all this boardroom upheaval is genuinely not helping the club. It is putting the club in a position where, we can't obviously, make appointments. We can't attract investors. We can't raise extra funds. We can't negotiate new deals because the people are not there to make the ultimate decision. The CEO is not there. The chairman is not there. So there are massive issues there, and they do need to be addressed. And the sooner they're addressed, the better. Now, some people sort of put two and two together in terms of the departure of the chairman, the departure of the CEO, the departure of the head of football operations, and kind of decided that because of all that was happening, there must be a big takeover happening. Well, it appears obviously there's no truth in that. There is at this moment in time nobody interested in taking over the club lock, stock, and barrel. As I outlined on the previous video, doing that would be very hard because you've got to line up 4 or 5 investors and buy all their shares to get control of the club. So it is an issue. It's a big issue. It appears that if there is going to be any investment into Rangers, it will be a small time investment, not a major investment into the club. So look, that's where we're up to at this moment in time. But look, it's not great, is it? When you pick up the papers, or you go onto the internet, or you go onto websites, Rangers websites, and you read this negative press about us all the time, and it doesn't market the club very well. When you've got a former star calling us a circus, when you've got the finance expert who's worked with top Premier League teams coming out and criticising the boardroom upheaval, showing that there's this huge gap between Celtic and Rangers. Anybody who is looking at Rangers as a potential investment will look at that and say, well, actually, I'm going to stay well clear of that. Or, you know, players, prospective players as well, looking at it, you will just go, well, do I really want to go to a club that's in such a massive financial upheaval and is in difficulty, you know, clearly has a lot of difficulty, financial difficulties, but just has, you know, major upheaval going on at the club at this moment in time. You know, people don't like that. You know, players don't like that. They want a stable background to come to. And I think all of this going into January could really put players off. Coming could put investors off. It's not a good look the club are putting out there at this moment in time, and it's somebody needs to get a hold of things and get this under control. I don't think for a minute that's John Gilligan. I don't think he's up to the job. The sooner a CEO is appointed, the better, but it needs to be someone who is capable of doing the job. You know, not a yes man, not somebody who is a stooge of the present board, not somebody who is Douglas Park's best mate. You know, it's got to be someone from outside who's got football knowledge and business knowledge too. Well, guys, let me know what you think of the stories we've covered in today's video. Thank you for watching Glasgow Rangers Nation, guys. As always, please like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Apologies for the slight internet issues again. I don't know what is wrong with my internet at the moment. I'm having real issues and problems with it. I will do my best to rectify those issues. Thank you for watching Glasgow Rangers Nation. As always, guys, on the way out, do all that good stuff for me. And remember, always, we are.